Britain's greatest healthcare institution just admitted it. Without Filipino nurses, the NHS would collapse. But the truth is darker than you think. From poverty traps to mass exodus, from exploitative visa rules to betrayal at home, this is the untold story of how Filipino nurses are propping up the UK's health system. Stay tuned, because what they're revealing is shocking. If you're interested in this topic, hit the like button, subscribe, and type "interested" in the comments, and I will give you a heart. Britain's National Health Service, the pride of a nation once hailed as the model of universal care, has just made a confession that shocked the world. Without Filipino nurses, the NHS would collapse. This isn't an exaggeration. It's a fact, echoed by health officials, hospital executives, and frontline workers themselves. For decades, Britain called them helpers. Now they are the backbone. But this confession exposes something deeper. A system built on Filipino strength, but fueled by quiet exploitation, visa traps, and a level of dependence that reveals how fragile the United Kingdom's healthcare truly is. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear will change how you see both Britain and the Philippines forever. The NHS currently faces over 44,000 nursing vacancies in England alone, according to government data. That means thousands of hospital beds can't open, surgeries are delayed, and patients wait longer, unless foreign nurses fill the gap. 1 in 5 NHS workers is now foreign-born, and guess who dominates those ranks? Filipinos. They're the heartbeat of the UK's wards, the ones holding the line during endless night shifts when everyone else burns out. The NHS recruitment pipeline in Manila has been running non-stop since 2000, and every year Britain imports thousands more. These are not just workers. They are lifelines flown 8,000 miles away to keep Britain's heart beating. But here's the irony. While the UK praises them as heroes, the truth is they're being paid less, promoted slower, and left vulnerable in a system that calls them essential but treats them as disposable. Let me tell you about Maria Santos, a nurse from Laguna who sold her family land to pay the agency fees, promising her a dream career in London. She arrived in 2023 bright-eyed, armed with skill and compassion. But within months, she realized she was doing double shifts in understaffed wards, often covering for 2 people because half her team had quit. Her visa tied her to one employer. If she complained, she risked deportation. Her rent consumed half her salary, her commute 2 hours each way, and yet she smiled through exhaustion because, like so many Filipinos, she had family depending on every remittance. Maria isn't alone. Stories like hers fill the break rooms of London, Leeds, and Liverpool hospitals. And yet Britain keeps recruiting because they can't stop. Here's the system they never talk about. Britain's health system doesn't just want Filipino nurses, it needs them to survive. The Guardian reported that without international recruitment, the NHS would fall short of its staffing goals by 93%. Yes, 93, that's not strategy, that's dependence. And dependence always comes with a price. In this case, the price is paid by Filipinos who left everything behind. The UK gets healing hands, the Philippines loses its own healers, hospitals back home close wings. Rural clinics wait months to replace a single nurse. The Philippines trains the world's caregivers, but who cares for the Philippines? That's the cruel paradox. What makes Filipino nurses so indispensable? It's not just skill, it's heart. British patients notice it. They write letters calling them angels, praising their compassion, patience, and smiles, even during 12-hour shifts. Culturally, Filipinos excel where AI and cold bureaucracy fail. They connect human to human. That's why every hospital ward in Britain seems to have that one Filipino nurse everyone depends on when things get chaotic. Yet the system repays that loyalty with limited career mobility and restrictive contracts. According to the Royal College of Nursing, many foreign nurses in the UK remain stuck in the same band for years, earning less than their British counterparts doing the same work. The NHS publicly praises diversity but quietly blocks promotion pipelines for international nurses. It's the first real shock. The system is built on their back, but doesn't want them at the top. Then there's the visa problem. The so-called health and care worker visa, introduced to make recruitment easier, has trapped thousands of Filipino nurses in legal limbo. The moment they lose their job, they lose their right to stay in the UK. That means no power to negotiate, no freedom to transfer, no choice but to endure abuse. The Guardian reported cases where Filipino nurses were hired and fired within weeks, left homeless and jobless overnight. The law says they have 60 days to find another sponsor or leave the country. Imagine that pressure while working 16-hour days saving lives. That's not immigration, that's indentured service with a smile. And still, they show up. Because for Filipinos, commitment isn't just a job description, it's a cultural code. They work not just for a salary, but for a purpose. That's why even as they struggle, they earn Britain's trust in ways no other nationality has. The NHS calls them heroes. But heroes deserve more than medals. They deserve justice. If Britain ever lost its Filipino nurses, the system would crumble overnight. Hospitals would face emergency closures, patients would wait days for care, and entire wards would go dark. That's the unspoken fear behind the confession. But here's the real question. If the NHS knows this, why aren't they protecting them better? Why is the same system that calls them essential pushing them into poverty? Maybe because the UK doesn't just depend on Filipino nurses, it depends on their silence. Because if they ever refuse to work under these conditions, Britain would have a crisis overnight. And trust me, the next segment will prove it. Because if you think this confession was shocking, wait until you see the price these nurses actually pay to keep the NHS alive. The wages, the visa traps, the betrayals that force them into poverty, those truths are the second wave of this confession. The world needs to hear that. So stick around because the next chapter is where gratitude meets guilt, and Britain won't be able to deny it any longer. Comment respect if you believe Filipino nurses deserve more than thanks, they deserve a future. The confession was only the beginning. What comes next is the price no one talks about. The cost of saving lives in a country that calls you a hero but traps you like a prisoner. Filipino nurses keep the United Kingdom breathing, yet many live one missed paycheck away from hunger. The headlines never say it, but behind every smiling photo of a nurse in a crisp NHS uniform lies a mountain of debt, a chain of visa conditions, and a loneliness so deep that some quietly break under its weight. According to The Guardian, overseas nurses working for Britain's National Health Service are being pushed into poverty by welfare rules that bar them from public support for their first 5 years. Imagine that. You pay taxes, you heal the sick, but when your child gets sick or your rent doubles, you have zero safety net. The system gives you a contract but denies you humanity. It starts long before they even land in Heathrow. The recruitment pipeline itself is a financial trap. Most Filipino nurses borrow hundreds of thousands of pesos to pay agency fees, training, and placement costs. They're told it's an investment. But when they arrive, deductions, hidden charges, and relocation expenses eat away at their salaries. In a country where rent in London can reach £1,500 sterling, 0 pence a month for a single room, even a nurse's salary barely stretches. Many share flats with 6 or 7 other migrants, cooking rice in electric kettles just to save a few pounds. One nurse told ITV News, "I care for million-pound machines, but I can't afford heating for my own room." That's the absurdity of Britain's dependence. It imports compassion, but exports poverty. Here's Harvard International Business reporter Robert Trench looking at how small countries like Japan might easily replicate. Then comes the visa trap. The so-called health and care worker visa, hailed by the UK Home Office as a fast-track solution, has turned into a cage. Lose your job and the clock starts ticking. 60 days to find another employer or get deported. It doesn't matter if you spent years serving patients during pandemics or saving lives in understaffed wards. One HR error or conflict with management can end your entire life in Britain. And because the visa ties each nurse to a single sponsor, hospitals hold silent power. Complain about abuse, ask for fair pay, or refuse an extra shift, and you risk losing everything. The Guardian revealed cases of nurses suddenly dismissed and left homeless, their IDs invalid overnight. That's not freedom, that's modern-day servitude wrapped in bureaucracy. Even when they stay employed, the hierarchy keeps them down. Filipino nurses often remain stuck in Band 5 positions for years, while British-born colleagues climb into Band 6 and 7 roles. Career progression slows, recognition fades, and promotions mysteriously stall. It's the quiet discrimination nobody wants to name because the Filipino nurses never complain. But silence isn't acceptance, it's survival. Hospitals rely on it. They know these workers can't strike easily or move elsewhere, so they give them the hardest wards, the night shifts, the cases others refuse. It's not meritocracy, it's exploitation disguised as gratitude. Let's talk about wages. While official numbers say NHS nurses earn roughly £28,000 sterling, 0 pence £34,000 sterling, 0 pence a year, many Filipino nurses see far less after tax deductions and cost of living. Converted to pesos, it sounds huge, but in real terms, they're barely scraping by. Overtime becomes survival, not ambition. Some pick up double shifts, collapsing from exhaustion, but returning the next day because families back home depend on those remittances. In 2024 alone, Filipinos in the UK sent more than $2 billion, 0 cents back home. A lifeline for the Philippines economy, but a drain on their own well-being. They're keeping two nations alive, the one they serve and the one they left. And what happens when burnout hits? The NHS calls it a staffing issue. But for Filipino nurses, burnout isn't just tiredness, it's guilt. Guilt for wanting rest while your family prays for your next remittance. Guilt for thinking of quitting when the Philippines expects you to succeed. The Royal College of Nursing warns that nurse retention is collapsing, with thousands applying to leave Britain for Canada, Australia, or New Zealand. Why? Because those countries now offer better pay, permanent residency, and family visas. The UK still calls its program ethical recruitment, but the truth is, it's running a revolving door of exhausted workers. Every Filipino nurse that leaves is replaced by another dreamer stepping into the same trap. Then there's the emotional toll. Many nurses work through Christmas alone, watching their British colleagues go home to family while they FaceTime loved ones across oceans. They celebrate birthdays through screens, cry quietly between shifts, and keep smiling because Filipino resilience is their only armor. But even resilience has a breaking point. The pandemic proved that. When COVID-19 hit, Filipinos made up a disproportionate number of NHS nurse deaths. They fought on the front lines without proper PPE, often volunteering for high-risk wards because no one else would. The government thanked them with claps on doorsteps, but policies barely changed. Hero one year, forgotten the next. So let's connect the dots. The NHS admits it can't survive without them, yet its policies ensure many Filipino nurses can't survive within it. That's the real paradox. Britain's healthcare system needs compassion, but rewards compliance, not courage. The deeper problem isn't recruitment, it's recognition. Filipinos are hired for their kindness, but denied authority. They're trusted with patience, but not with power. And every day that continues, the UK digs itself deeper into dependence. Because when you build your system on invisible heroes, eventually those heroes fade. But the cracks are already showing. In 2025, nurse vacancies remain at crisis levels, and burnout has become epidemic. Hospitals in London and Birmingham have started rehiring retired staff just to plug gaps. The government blames Brexit. The unions blame pay, but the truth is simpler. Britain never built sustainability, it built survival, and Filipinos have been carrying it ever since. The question now is, how long can this last? Because a new movement is rising. Filipino nurses demanding equal pay, faster promotions, and fair immigration rights. They're no longer whispering, they're organizing. And if that movement grows, Britain will face a reckoning unlike any before. Because when the backbone stands tall, the system must bend. Comment fairness. If you believe every Filipino nurse deserves fair treatment, equal pay, and a future free from fear. Because as you'll see in the next segment, the UK is already learning what happens when Filipino nurses start walking away, and it's not pretty. The warning signs are everywhere. Britain's National Health Service has admitted its dependence, Filipino nurses have carried its weight, and yet the system keeps taking without giving back. But what happens when the backbone finally breaks? When the quiet heroes say enough? That's not a hypothetical anymore. It's already starting. Across hospitals in England, managers whisper about staff shortages unlike anything they've seen. The Royal College of Nursing reports that 1 in 3 international nurses is now considering leaving the UK for better conditions abroad. Canada, Australia, and New Zealand are offering not just higher pay, but permanent residency, family reunification, and dignity. Britain offers exhaustion and a 5-year visa. The math isn't hard. The exodus has begun. Imagine a hospital ward in Birmingham on a winter night, the snow outside, the lights dimmed, and a single nurse left covering 20 patients. That nurse used to be part of a Filipino trio, Maria, Joel, and Angela, but now only Maria remains. Joel moved to Ontario last month. Angela transferred to Dubai, where she earns twice as much tax-free. Maria does the work of 3 people now, heart-pounding as monitors beep nonstop. That's the new normal in the NHS, a skeleton crew where the last Filipinos are still standing because they can't afford to quit for now. The NHS's reliance on foreign nurses has reached critical mass. Over 150,000 internationally trained nurses currently work across the UK, and more than a third of them are from the Philippines. The problem? Britain can't replace them fast enough. Local recruitment is stagnant, training pipelines are slow, and homegrown graduates are leaving the profession within 5 years due to burnout. In simple terms, the NHS has built its future on borrowed labor. If those workers walk away, the entire structure collapses. And here's the second shock. The UK government knows it. Internal memos from NHS England acknowledge serious risks to service delivery if overseas retention rates fall. But instead of reforming, they double down, sending more recruiters to Manila, luring even more nurses out of the Philippines. It's a short-term fix that creates a long-term disaster. Because while Britain imports talent, the Philippines bleeds expertise. Rural hospitals back home lose staff faster than they can train replacements. That's not just a foreign policy issue, it's a humanitarian one. The same country healing Britain is suffering from its own shortage of healers. The brain drain is staggering. According to the Philippine Department of Health, over 20,000 nurses left for the UK between 2021 and 2024 alone. Meanwhile, Philippine hospitals report critical understaffing levels, awards closing, patients waiting hours for basic care, young graduates rushing to leave the moment they qualify. The irony burns. A developing nation keeps the developed world alive. And that's the third problem. Dependence without reciprocity. Britain claps for them, but doesn't protect them. During the pandemic, Filipino nurses made up a disproportionate number of NHS deaths, more than any other foreign nationality. They volunteered in COVID wards, stayed when others resigned, and risked everything. Yet after the crisis faded, so did the promises. Pay raises were delayed, hazard bonuses were forgotten, recognition came as plaques, not policies. That betrayal cut deep. Many began to realize they weren't saving a nation, they were saving a system that would never save them back. So what happens next? We're already seeing it. Across the UK, hospitals are closing units due to staff shortages. Maternity wards in Kent, geriatric wards in Liverpool, mental health facilities in Wales. Waiting times for emergency care hit record highs in 2025. Some patients waiting over 14 hours for treatment. The press blames politics, but insiders know the truth. Without Filipino nurses, the system can't function. Every resignation triggers panic. Every departure leaves a vacuum. Britain is finally learning what happens when you take your heroes for granted. But this story isn't just about collapse, it's about choice. The Philippines now holds quiet power, the same power every exporting nation eventually discovers: leverage. Because if the world needs your people to survive, you can demand better terms. You can negotiate not from weakness, but from strength. That's what Filipino nurses represent, the soft power of a nation built on compassion. The question is, will the Philippines use it? Imagine a world where Filipino nurses no longer migrate out of desperation, but out of leadership, where Britain doesn't just recruit them, but collaborates with the Philippines to train, protect, and empower them, where remittances aren't the only measure of success, respect is. That world is possible, but it starts when both countries confront the truth. Dependence without fairness is slavery. In the UK, this realization is already brewing. Parliamentary debates have begun questioning the ethics of recruiting from red list countries, nations like the Philippines that face their own health crises. Some call it exploitation, others call it necessity. The truth is, it's both. Britain needs Filipino nurses, but needing someone should never mean using them. Still, amid the exhaustion, something beautiful persists. Filipino nurses continue to show up with smiles, kindness, and faith. They become family to their patients, bridging cultures with warmth. They're proof that compassion can't be quantified. Even as the system fails them, they never fail the people they care for. That's the final shock. Not how much Britain depends on them, but how much humanity they give back in return. And so the confession stands. The NHS is held together by Filipino hands. But confession means nothing without change. The UK must do more than thank them. It must protect, promote, and partner with them. Because when the next crisis comes, and it will, it won't be policy or politics that saves Britain. It'll be the same people it's overlooked for decades. The day Filipino nurses stop saving everyone else and start demanding the same care they give will be the day the world changes. Until then, they remain both the UK's blessing and its warning. Because no system, no matter how powerful, can survive on borrowed compassion forever. Common vision, if you believe the future must honor Filipino nurses not as helpers, but but as healers shaping nations. Because when history is written, it won't be kings or ministers who held Britain together, it will be Filipinos.